the respective forerunners of the world and of the church. So there was no ET or extraterrestrial, Anunnaki, all this sort of stuff. It's all man-made myth, man-created myth. The children of Seth built their social life upon that divine system in which they were placed and lived in expectation of the promise of the world's recovery. So back to this, where it states, from them sprang two races, the sons of God, those who were in the presence of God, had communion with him, walked and talked with him, etc. This new holy line, where Christ was supposed to come through originally, and the children of men. That's the ungodly, the wicked, the outrighteous, ordinary men who had no reason for God. That would be, according to the Tau Astra Brita, from the original ancient, very old language of God, sacred language of God, spoken by God to Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, Te Lishana Tika Sapra, that God made these human beings first in his image, not of the dust, not of the ground. We have read that these were spiritual beings. They created spiritual beings. But in the Brita, it actually says that God created pre-Adamic man. Aborigines, not the boomerang throwing type, but as the translator Victor N. Alexander put it, would like to put it, in the term indigenous, meaning that they were of tribal affiliation, etc. Possibly the Cro-Magnon, gatherer, hunter, cave dweller, who followed his animal instincts. And this agrees with the archaeological findings, scientific findings, discoveries, facts, etc., that there was a prehistoric being, cave dweller, hunter gatherer, in ancient times, or a time unknown, or so many thousands of years ago. So, from them sprang two races, the sons of God, who left their rightful place. So there's no aliens, no Anunnaki, or that sort of stuff. They turned their back on God. And the children of men, the respective forerunners of the world and of the church. The children of Seth built their social life upon that divine system in which they were placed, and lived in expectation of the promise of the world's recovery. Cain and his family were driven out from God's presence, or Cain was, by then Adam and Eve. That's basically what it's saying. And sought by their own contrivance to supply what seemed irreparably lost. Society arose in both that family relation in which God had placed them. Mankind were bound together not by voluntary agreement, but by natural affinity, and the nation was but a wider household. But though society itself had thus a divine principle, yet the contrivances which minister to it, the arts of life, the means of security, these had a human origin, and were produced by the self-interest and necessities of man. Seth dwelt with his father Adam, and when his first child was born, we read of no consequence but the establishment of God's public worship. Then began men to call upon the name of the Lord. Genesis 4:26. No doubt the voice of prayer had before been heard, but this multiplication of the family necessitated some more formal establishment of the divine service. Cain, on the other hand, whose object was to defend himself from being a fugitive in the earth, or upon the earth, built the first city and called it after the name of his firstborn son. Verse 17. And the two races continued to run parallel to one another. In the time of Lamech, the seventh from Adam, the powers of human society came to a head. His children were leaders in their several ways to the herdsmen and artificers of the world. Adar, Beer-Jabal, he was father of such as dwell in tents and have cattle, and his brother's name was Jubal, who was the father of all such as handle the harp and organ. The first band. And Zillah, she also bare Tubal-Cain, and instructor of every artificer in brass and iron. Verse 20 to 22. These gifts were in fact but manifestations of that sovereign wisdom from which human skill as well as human conscience proceeds, the confused remains of that divine image which had formerly been perfectly manifest. This image was never so far effaced as not to show the traces of what it once had been. Thus the perfection of human skill was shown in Bezalel to be God's inspiration. Ezekiel 31 verse 3. And even man's society had its sanction and strength from the wisdom of God. By its king's reign and princes decree justice. Proverbs 8:15. But that the worldly seed should be allowed to work out and develop these gifts of God, that it should bring society to its strength, should build cities and provide the arts which defend it and adorn them, as a proof that there is a certain maturity of man's social state, which is to be brought about through human agency. This Lamech beheld in the labours of his children, and to it probably he referred when he compared the security of himself, the seventh from Adam, with that of the first founder of city life. He had heard of God's sentence on Cain, but he derided it when he thought of the strength and ingenuity of his family and of the safety which society conferred. If Cain shall be avenged sevenfold, surely Lamech 70 and sevenfold. Genesis 4:24. That's when, apparently, according to the lost book of Adam and Eve, probably part 2, or book 2, that by accident when he was hunting, Lamech killed a husband. Supposedly he killed Cain, and he killed a young man as lechery for his bride-to-be. And that's why he had the two wives. If Cain shall be avenged sevenfold, surely Lamech 70 and sevenfold if anyone killed him for what he did. Far different was the confidence which in the same generation was displayed by the descendant of Seth. The dispositions of men already indicated that the advancement of civil society would be attended by a neglect of its real end. But in this very generation did God raise up a testimony to the reality of his moral government, and to the vanity of all attempts at improvement in which he was forgotten. Enoch, the seventh from Adam, prophesied concerning these, saying, Behold, or take note, look, listen up, the Lord cometh with 10,000 of his saints to execute judgment upon all, and to convince all that are ungodly among them of all their ungodly deeds which they have ungodly committed, and of all their hard speeches which ungodly sinners have spoken against them. And Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. Genesis verse 24. Thus early were the principles of human society and the hallowed rule of heavenly communion brought into opposition with one another. Both arose from those natural relations with which God has formed mankind, and from these powers and endowments which he has given, but they speedily took their leave of one another. Yet the happiness of man's life depends upon them moving together with an equal pace, and the complete establishment of Christ's kingdom implies their perfect combination. And the great object of history is to show how these powers diverge from one another, and how they have again been brought to unite. Their times of meeting are the grand epochs in the annals of mankind. Before the flood, these powers of the world and the church were altogether divided. In one family, God was worshipped, and Adam's life of 931 years, well, he actually didn't live that long according to the Terrestrials Brita, Genesis in English. He doesn't really state how old he lived for and he died, but that his lineage of descendants was 930 years. So this, that he died 930 years of age, as found in your Americanized English Bible versions, your modern Bible versions, that he died at 930 is incorrect. If coming from the original Terrestrial manuscripts, that it was his lineage, not how long he lived and died when he died. Okay, so during this 931 years, of his lineage. It enabled him to testify God's work to 8 generations of his children. Methuselah, his descendant in the 8th generation, lived 969 years, supposedly. But again, that's his lineage. So that he could talk with Noah, his grandson, and with the children of Noah, and tell them what the first man had declared to him. But out of this household God was forgotten. All flesh had corrupted his way upon the earth. Genesis 6:12. Even the worldly purposes of human society were destroyed. It did not yield present security. The earth was corrupt before God, and the earth was filled with violence. And God said unto Noah, the end of all flesh is come before me, for the earth is filled with violence through them, and behold, I will destroy them with the earth. But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. Genesis 6:11, 13, and 8. And here is a picture of some god, Jupiter Pluvius, or the god of rain, according to the ancients, from the column of Antonius. His army was delivered when surrounded by the Quadri by a wonderful rain, which was attributed by the heathen to the intervention of the gods, but by the church to the prayers of his Christian soldiers. So that's probably some sort of myth. Chapter 2, the earth peopled. The breath of heaven has blown away what toiling earth had piled. Was that piled? Sketching wise heart and crafty hand, as breeze to strew on nation sand the fabrics of a child. Christian year. The flood is the first great epoch in history, for by it God destroyed the worldly race, and the chosen family became the representatives of mankind. God saved them in the ark from perishing by water, while he brought in the flood upon the world of the ungodly. 2 Peter 2:5. Just as the ark of Christ's church, baptismal service, has since been appointed as the only sure means of preservation. This flood and the means of man's deliverance from it were long remembered among the different tribes of mankind, and an ancient historian tells us that in its days there were some remains of the ark to be seen among the mountains of Armenia, and that the pitch procured from it was employed as a charm. 3. Berosus. Maybe it's Josephus 1:4. I'm not sure on that one. For when the waters subsided, it was in this country in the heart of Asia that the ark rested on the mountains of Ararat. Well, we again have found that actually what wouldn't have been on the peak, the very, very top, where it was absolutely freezing. So how were Noah and his family supposed to survive if it was sub-zero? It was actually found lower. It's on a flat plain below it. Noah and his 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, together with their wives, and the animals which they had kept alive in the ark, issued forth to occupy the empty world. For some time Noah's family lived together, and before they separated, a prediction was uttered by the aged patriarch, which has been wonderfully accomplished in the general arrangement of the world. Taking occasion from the want of reverence shown to him by Ham, and from the filial duty of Shem and Japheth, Noah declared what would be the general fortune of their future descendants. To the children of Shem he promised that they should be the special objects of some spiritual blessing, while Japheth's descendants should bear the leading part in the appropriation of this world's possessions. To Ham he gave no promise, and one of Ham's sons, who perhaps had taken part in his father's crime, he sentenced to be a servant to the children of his brother. Blessed be the Lord God of Shem, and Canaan shall be his servant. Genesis 9:26. Finally, he foretold a combination between the worldly power of the sons of Japheth and the spiritual seed of Shem. In this consummation, he predicted when those who possess earthly might should take up their rest with the heirs, or the heads of the chiefs, of their divine blessing, or their leaders of the lineage. That's the eldest son born to each family, right? Or each father. God shall enlarge Japheth, and he shall dwell in the tents of Shem, and Canaan shall be his servant. verse 27. The general fulfillment of this prophecy will be seen in the subsequent history. So early did God mark out what should be the general aspect of the world, but the first appearance of things promised otherwise. Nimrod, the first who rose to worldly eminence, was Ham's descendant, and with his followers the empire of the east for a while continued. Ham's other descendants, independent of Canaan, extended themselves over the continent of Africa, while the children of Shem continued in the neighbourhood of Armenia, i.e., so these Hamites or Kemites became the ancient Egyptians. The children of Shem continued in the neighbourhood of Armenia and thence spread towards Syria and Arabia. The family of Japheth was more widely diffused and stretching towards the northern part of Asia, extended to India on one side and Europe on the other side, from which son of Noah the early inhabitants of America came in is uncertain. Our knowledge concerning the rest is chiefly drawn from the likeness which there is in the language now spoken by different nations. Thus we are assured that we who live in Europe are akin to the inhabitants of India, because the Indian languages resemble those of the Teutonic or German family, while the Arabians who lie between us must be referred to a different son of Noah, because their language is totally distinct from that of either race. And there's a footnote indication at the back, at the bottom. 6. No philologer could examine them, example, Sanskrit, Greek or Latin, without believing them to have sprung from some common source which perhaps no longer exists. There is a similar reason, though not quite so forcible, for supposing that both the Gothic and the Celtic, though blended with a very different idiom, had the same origin with the Sanskrit. Sir W. Jones, Third Discourse. The Arabs sprung from a stock entirely different from that of the Hindus. Idem, Fourth Discourse. This difference of tongues was not first produced, though it has since been increased by the distance of different nations. But about 5 generations after the flood, proud men, the leaders, probably of the chief families of Noah's sons, wished to build them a great city, that they might not be divided from one another. All the world they thought would thus be gathered into one empire, and men would not be scattered without connections over the earth. This great design has since been set forth and will one day be fulfilled in Christchurch. But the kingdom desired by men was founded in pride and ended in ruin. By God's law, authority belonged to Noah, that just man who God had favoured, whereas this new city was the beginning of Nimrod's kingdom. Genesis 10:9, 1 Chronicles 1:10. Noah would have used his authority as a parent to keep his children from idolatry, and perhaps for this reason God continued his life for 350 years after the flood. But nothing good could be expected from Nimrod, that mighty hunter whose power was from strength, not from right, and who was the grandson of Ham, the least godly of those who escaped the flood. So many people out there will go, see, we told you that the grandson of Ham was black, Egyptian, etc. But we've done a video prior to this, and it states that they were all white and they came out of an ark, and when they migrated to different areas, hotter climates where the sun beat down on them every day, their skin developed or evolved to be able to handle that hot environment. So it became darker, a darker hue, possibly black. Okay, so Nimrod was the grandson of Ham, who started off as white, and then because he migrated to a different, hotter geographical location, his skin evolved and he became a dark hue, perhaps black. God was pleased, therefore, to defeat this plan for making the earth one kingdom. He confounded men's languages so that they could not understand each other's speech. They were obliged, therefore, to separate into different nations. Therefore is the name of the city called Babel, or Babel. Example, confusion, because the Lord did there confound the languages of all the earth. Genesis 11:9.